Universal credit is a new way of dealing with welfare. It incorporates 6 different benefits into one payment, and one of those payments is housing benefit, which is something that we're interested in as landlords. So how it will work is that, different to LHA was the forerunner of universal credit, where it moved from default to the landlord payments to default to the tenant. So the tenant would principally receive the benefit. So under LHA, the tenant would be expected to receive the money and hand it over to the landlord. The same under universal credit. The big difference with universal credit payments in the housing element, that is that there's no vulnerability criteria. So everybody, in inverted commas, will be paid directly, unless there is a compelling reason why they shouldn't be. And this is a major worry for landlords, because clearly we no longer have that vulnerability criteria we can rely on when someone has problems. The other issue with universal credit is the fact that at present under LHA, it's dealt with by the local authority. Universal credit will be managed by DWP from a remote call centre or several call centres. Again, most landlords will have built up a reasonable relationship with the local authority, and that will go under universal credit. They will simply be dealing with a call centre. Now, the original universal credit scheme had no access for landlords, and we've been campaigning since it was first mooted back in 2011-12 for access for landlords, because clearly some tenants need support in completing applications, in dealing with forms and so on, and also landlords need to have a handle on what's actually happening with the tenant's claim. So when it first started, landlords had no access through the telephone or email or even by writing. It was simply the tenant that would deal with it. Since then, things have kind of backed off significantly, and we've done an awful lot of work in campaigning against this. So we've now got access through a helpline telephone, through email, which is only very recent. The first email system that the DWP accepted was a secure one, which, unless you were a government employee, you wouldn't have any access to, so it was pointless really. They've now agreed to have access through your normal emails, Gmail, etc. However, there's only certain information you can send via an email, and it's very limited. And this is where we're now working on this particular issue, because what's happening now is that instead of you being able to send all the information required via email as you can now to your local authority, you can only send very limited amounts, nothing sensitive, nothing about income or tenancy agreements or anything. All that has to be sent by post. So you've got 2 systems now. You've got an email initial query, and then you've got to follow that up by post. And getting those 2 things together is obviously going to be a real problem when you've got millions of claimants. So we're campaigning quite strongly on that really there should be a facility for these documents to be transmitted by email. Much more secure, and of course it's going to land on the same desk at the same time rather than different areas. So that's something that we're working on at the moment. Other things with universal credit different to LHA are the payment cycle. Landlords will be used to the usual payment cycle. Tenant applies for housing benefit / local housing allowance. That then is paid in a 4-weekly cycle, usually about a month to 2 months after application, fair enough, but then it's paid 4-weekly, the same day, the same date as every other payment the landlord will be receiving if he's got any other tenants on welfare. Well, under universal credit, it's very different. Universal credit will be paid monthly in arrears, and it will be timed from when the claimant makes his first claim. How it will work is the first 7 days after the claim, won't get any money at all, and it'll be paid 7 days and 1 month after that initial application. So they tell us. So that's how it will work. So it can be any day in the week, any day in the month. It won't be like a housing benefit currently is. So that payment will then be made to the tenant in most cases. The vast majority of cases, far more cases than under the present rules. Now, one of the things that we've been arguing for, and what we get at the present time under LHA housing benefit, is we are notified when the claim is going to be paid. So we're expecting the claim to be paid on a particular day, even if it's received by the claimant and not by us. Under universal credit, we won't have that facility. So we won't know unless the tenant tells us when the claim's going to be paid. What we've argued for in this instance, and at the moment there is a problem with this, is that when they fill the online form in, then there should be a button on there for them to click on, so it will send a message to the landlord to say, I have made a claim for universal credit. We've put this to DWP. They have said they'll look at it, but of course at the moment the IT system is not working. And we know they've had lots of problems with the IT system. They're expecting that to be online at the end of this year. And really, there won't be a migration of existing claimants, we don't expect, until the IT system is online, because clearly that gets much more complicated. The present influx of universal credit claimants is really just simple claims, people that have never claimed before, single people, etc. So that's something that we're working on at the moment. And then, of course, if the tenant doesn't hand over the money, then we're into an arrears situation. It's similar to what happens now. 2 months in arrears or 8 weeks under LHA, it'll be 2 full months under universal credit before you can apply for an alternative payment, called an APA, basically. And if that's granted, then you will be paid direct as you are at the moment under LHA. You will also be able to apply for the arrears to be paid out of ongoing benefit paid to the claimant for his living expenses, which is something new. That's quite a good thing. We have argued that that should follow. In fact, the Secretary of State said it would follow the claimant. So if someone gets into an arrears with you, then those arrears, this is what the Secretary of State said at the start of this, he said that they would follow the claimant, so no landlord will be out of pocket. That isn't the case anymore. It will only be paid when the claimant is living in the property that the arrears pertain to. So that's something we're still working on, that it should follow the claim. And then the promise is kept then by the Secretary of State effectively. There are a few problems with alternative payment arrangements, and we've had some complaints from members where an arrangement's been agreed with DWP, the payment has not been suspended to the claimant, it's still been paid to the claimant, and the landlord is further out of pocket. We're currently in correspondence, let's say, with the DWP at the moment to get that changed, and what they've said is that under the present arrangements, just to recap on LHA, if it's paid incorrectly to the claimant when it's been agreed it will be paid to the landlord, then that's maladministration. Under maladministration, under housing benefit rules, compensation can be paid to the landlord. It's not rent, it's not housing allowance, it's compensation. What DWP have said about APAs or APAs is that if there is maladministration, which they've admitted in one case that we know about, then they will not, as a policy, pay compensation to the landlord. We feel this is unfair and unjust, and actually it's against their own rules. So we're currently working on that one as well to make sure that landlords at least don't lose out on that basis. In the first place, landlords who have a problem with any aspect of universal credit, we want to know about it, because information like that is so important for us to get policy changes with DWP. And also, if there's any surveys that you receive via email from ourselves, please complete them. Because those numbers are so important. When we're in front of officials, they want to know how many people are affected by a particular issue, what are the issues. It's so important that that information is passed through. Then we can pass it on when we're in front of the right people and hopefully get a better result for members and landlords.